Well, this podcast is really special to me personally. I never thought that I would be allowed to come back in this building. Obviously, that's a joke. So I'm sitting here next to my very first boss in the electrical trades industry, Clayton Good of Garden Spot Electric. It is an honor to be here.
Good to see you, Josh.
Yeah, thank you very much. A lot of what I do and any of my skill in the electrical industry is accredited to this company and the men and women who have worked here over the years. They've been in business since 1967. You might have heard me talk about them on the podcast before when I talked about, what we call Garden Spot Green. It's actually a Ford Fleet color from the 60s, but their trucks are this green color that really stands out, which obviously you'll be seeing in some of the footage here because we're going to film the crap out of all your stuff. So,
okay,
yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. So, well, Clayton, welcome to the line. So
glad to be here.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, we're going to do this thing where we talk about your origins, but this conversation is about more than just you. This conversation is about Garden Spot and what a legacy business is, because I think the founders of this company, whether they were intentional about it or not, they understood legacy and they understood hard work and not giving up. And I think that's something that I want to share that story because that tenacity is what you need in the trades. We often say to people, if you want to work in construction, if you want to work in the skilled trades, the sky is the limit to where you can go. But if you don't want to work, then don't come. Don't show up because it is hard work. Mm-hmm. We're surrounded here with millions of dollars of copper wire, and you can't really pull copper wire or work with it or form it of this size. What is that, like 600 MCM?
Yeah, it's 500, 600 there.
Yeah. You can't bend that if you're not used to it. I was shaking Tony's hand here earlier, and I remember when I started, you had told me about you guys used to wrestle when you were growing up together, and Tony always had the grip that was insane.
Yes, he did.
Comes from pulling copper wire.
Yeah.
So, well, tell us a little bit about Garden Spot's beginnings and how you started.
Okay. Yeah. This was be from Dad's perspective as far as what he had told us,
And who was your dad? What was his name?
Rufus Good.
Rufus Good.
Yeah. Yeah. And, yeah. So my dad was a farmer. He was from a family of farmers. Got married, lived down at the southern end of Lancaster County. Actually owned a farm right beside Solanco High School. And when they got married, they were told they couldn't have kids. And so they adopted 2 girls. And then later 4 biologicals came along. I was second in that line. Tony's oldest, and I have 2 younger. So I have 4 sisters and 1 brother. And but Dad, right about the time I was born, had back surgery. Had his 4 discs fused. And they told him he had to move off the farm and he would never do hard labor again.
How did that happen to him, like with the back surgery? Did he?
I don't know if it was just the jarring of the tractor or just genetics. I've had back surgeries. I'm not sure. My son's had back surgery, so there might be a little genetics.
Well, I know a funny thing just about Rufus and my history. My business partner and I both worked here with Rufus, and we still talk about this day the way that your dad walked.
Yeah, the lean.
He had a lean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That only got accentuated with age. Yes. But yeah. So at that point, they lived in the southern end. They were attending Mechanics Grove Church of the Brethren, and the pastor of their church was Charlie Hebner, and he was leaving the pastor to go start an electrical business.
Yeah.
And I'm not 100% sure in all the details and who, but somewhere in that process, Dad went to work for him as an apprentice. Here he is, 30 years old, has 4 kids.
Wow.
Starting all over.
Yeah.
That's the part that when I think back is like, holy cats. Yeah, that's something I never had to, go through. So he had met Jake through working at Hebner Associates because Jake's wife was a Hebner.
And Jake was Jacob Toes, right?
Jacob Toes, yes.
Yeah.
So that's Dad's, and Jake was about 15 years older than Dad.
Okay.
So he had experience, and then so Dad and him got together, worked at Hebner, and then they decided. And I don't know the details on how they decided, but they wanted to start their own business, so they did. And I don't know much about the early years other than Dad was in the field, Jake was in the office, and they did all kinds of jobs. They did water and wastewater. They did the library over at Millersville. I remember as a kid, they did schools because Tony and I would on Saturdays go pick up little pieces of copper on the job site and take them home, just clean up little stuff. I don't know. Again, things we weren't even junior high age.
Yeah.
Having kids like that walk around the job site.
Yeah.
It's things you never do.
That doesn't happen today.
No, never.
Yeah.
So, So then, the business it ebbed and flowed a little bit with the economy.
Yeah.
In the 70s, it started 67 in the 70s, and then Tony graduated in 78. He worked a couple summers too, but he started in 78, and then I would have started in 80 when we graduated high school, and we both went through the apprenticeship program. And then that's about the time that Dick Toes, who's Jake's son, who's an electrical engineer, he worked for a nuclear power plant, like engineer for nuclear power plant. He kind of traveled around, lived in Florida, some in the Midwest, but he came back to work at Garden Spot.
Okay.
And then it was in 1986. I remember very well because it was the week my oldest son was born was the week I bought Garden Spot. I was 26 years old.
Wow.
I was 24 years old. Tony's 26. And then so Dick, Tony, and I bought Garden Spot at that point. And Dick would have been 15 years older than us.
Okay.
At that point, there was only 4 or 5 employees.
Wow.
It wasn't. I remember. It was either right before that or right after that. No, it would have been before that. Like I was newly married and we didn't work, so Tony and I were laid off.
Yeah. When you bought the company.
Right before we bought the company. Yeah, it would have been several years before we bought the company. Yeah, because it would have been in like 84, 85, somewhere in there.
Well, and that's something with construction. It does ebb and flow.
Right.
We've seen less and less in that over the years.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, the way I see Garden Spot growing was Dick is a process guy.
Yeah.
And he would set up procedures and as far as he was very good at the business end of the business. I was get to work, manage the work.
Yeah.
And Tony was run the field. And the three of us, our gifts just meshed together really, really well. I came up through the field and was foreman on some jobs and stuff, but my main, once I got in the office is when it was
natural.
Yeah. It was.
That's really fascinating to me because I think one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is what you can do as an individual, and then when you bring a team together, what you can do as a team. And it's not like a 1 for 1 equals 2. Like it's actually a multiplier beyond that. When you bring the three of you together that way, where Dick is handling that business end on this side, you're handling the project management end, and Tony's handling the work, it kind of frees up brain space, doesn't it, for you to be more effective and grow at a different pace. Yeah,
100%. And having ownership in the field is something that I think was such a foreign concept to most people. Like everybody thinks if you're in the office, that's where the owners belong.
Yeah.
But having that and it just creates a different atmosphere in the field, I think.
Oh, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Like I said in the beginning and before we were talking, a lot of what I've learned from Garden Spot. And so when I started my first business, that was I made this statement. I said, I'm going to be in the office and you're going to be in the field. Where do you think I got that from?
Yeah.
And I firsthand learned from an owner's perspective, a baby owner, but from an owner's perspective, how important that ownership in the field was. Totally changes the way that you do projects. And it actually, in my opinion, makes you more effective in the way that you do projects.
Yeah.
Don't you think it also translates? So when I was in the field, Tony, was my boss in the field,
Right.
and you learn an apprentice and you get mentored by an owner, and so you learn some things that you can't learn any other way.
Right.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, and just that whole process of like you said, the learning process throughout, having somebody there that has a stake in it. It's just
Yeah.
it's a different perspective.
Don't you even think that customers love that as well?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
because they're like they have a stake in it, and so they feel like you care,
Right.
because your name is directly attached with what you're building.
Right.
Yeah,
And the other biggest thing I think it does for us is it's a team.
Yeah.
Like we're our guys in the field, our apprentices through me.
yeah,
I mean, through the whole way through, apprentices, journeyman electrician, all feel a part of the same process.
Yeah.
It takes away a lot of tears that I think sometimes get in the way of
Yeah.
people growing and doing good work.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think that's not only is it essential, and I don't know if it's because of where I come from, and if you need any adjustments, we can help with that. But not only because of where I come from, which is here. I mean, literally, my business acumen, my trade acumen, all of that is built from this. Like it's really weird. This feels like home to me. I feel like I'm sitting in the living room, and it feels very nostalgic. But the reality is, learning those things and applying them. We were talking earlier. When I started my business, I had no business starting a business. And I had actually,
And we probably would have thought that.
yeah, well, they would have been correct. But do you know why I did? If you remember, I left here and I went somewhere else, and I won't say the name of the company that I went to. They actually paid me more money,
Right.
but I learned another valuable thing. Money is not the people that you work with. And I got more money, but I had been here for quite a few years before I went somewhere else. And I never had experienced not trusting the people that I worked with, ever. And I went to an organization that it was like, if there was a way to blame me for something, whether I did it or not, they would try to do it. And the thing that I realized was, wow, okay. And it's funny, the older you get, a couple bucks an hour is just that. It's a couple bucks an hour. It's not worth the pain and the agony of what you have to deal with, and not feeling like you're part of a team, feeling like you're isolated and alone. And so I had, like I said, I had no business in starting a business, but that was why when I started it with doing public work as well, because there was no reputation, there was no anything to be able to get opportunity. The only thing that I had was where I had come from. And whenever people would ask me where I used to work, the place that I worked for less than a year, I never told them about. But the place that I worked for years, I always told them about, because there was a legacy and a reputation with that. What we'll call it, we used to say we bleed green. So, yeah. So you guys had bought the business then, and you were building it, and you were experiencing working together as a team, and you're into that was in the late 80s that you bought the business. And so what was the biggest change from Rufus and Jake to a second generation?
Well, the industry changed a lot. I mean, when I first started, no paid vacation, no paid holidays.
Come on.
Workers were just a commodity.
Wow.
Then that's just the way the industry was.
Like the wire that's sitting all around us.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just something you use, and in that there was a shift in the industry.
Really?
And I think, and I think we might have pushed the shift in our part when we could at least like we wanted to, because for us it's more, it's not just about the business, it's about the people who work here and the relationships we have. what I think is a special group of guys that work here.
I would agree.
And we're family.
Quite a few of them are still here that
Yes.
were here when I was here
Yes.
over 20 some years ago.
I don't know the exact percentage, but 95% of the people who work here I've hired out of high school.
Yeah.
So they've been here that long.
Let's talk about that, because I actually think that's something, I believe that the best way to build a team and to build people in your company, and I didn't know this, like we talked about how I had no business starting a business, and that is the reality and the truth. So I had to learn a lot of things the hard way. And I thought, well, you hire for experience. I got this big job. I need to hire a journeyman. And the best people in our organization are people that started with zero experience and wanted to come alongside and learn. And so talk about that a little bit in what you did.
I mean, overall, yeah, sometimes we get busy and we look to hire for experience. And oftentimes that would backfire. We're more about culture
Yeah.
and who we are as people, not necessarily at work, but also outside of work.
Yeah.
And so having that mix, having new people come in that had a different way of looking at things didn't always work out well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some, I mean, we have guys that work here that hasn't started out of high school and they've worked out fine. So,
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you work here, he's not talking about you.
Yeah, no, but just the development, to be able to see a kid. I've worked with youth since 1982 at the church, and people through the years say, "Yeah, where do you get help?"
Caleb, can you come fix his mic? It keeps dropping.
Oh,
Yeah.
Where do you get help? And I said, I don't have a problem finding help.
Yeah.
And we've just, through the years, we've developed a relationship with the Votech schools and just knowing people who know kids, that you give me an honest kid that wants to work.
Boy, there it is.
And that's all you need. And then from there, once they get here, the culture, I mean, our guys, they take care of each other. They look out for each other. We're just so blessed. And I don't think there's a job we finish up that people don't come up to us and say, like, you guys are different.
Yeah.
And that's just really special for us. I mean, the way we look at things as a company, for me, is, I should got rid of my phone. It's buzzing. Sorry.
Yeah, that is what happens.
I'm trying to think what I was saying. The culture and the people first.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the shifts we made.
So when you made that shift, like, Clayton, how do you do that as a company, especially being a second generation, because you guys didn't buy the company and your dads who founded it. And there's a difference, I believe, between founders and the next generation.
100%.
Yeah.
They laid the groundwork.
Yeah.
100%.
And they look at things differently than you do. So how did that work in you guys bringing your vision for Garden Spot? Because they have to kind of collide, maybe is the wrong word, but they have to kind of come together and then morph and move forward, because Rufus and Jake didn't leave right away.
Right. And that, to their credit, that they got behind us instead of pulling us, and
yeah. Rufus is, I know what you mean when you say he got behind you, because I'm not even his son, and I feel like he got behind me.
Yeah, I mean, just the support we felt, and all they wanted us to do is succeed.
Yeah.
So there was never, so that's what helped propel us. I mean, he went back. I mean, if anything, it's hard to imagine, but he worked harder for us when we were owners than he worked as when he was an owner, just because he wanted to propel us. Yeah.
Well, and how long? So when I started here, I want to say that Rufus was in his 70s.
He worked till he was 70, I believe.
Okay.
He would have been. He was born in 32.
He was in his late 60s then when I started.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
When he sold the company in 86, he was somewhere mid 50s.
Yeah.
Since Jake was older and Jake wanted to get out.
Yeah.
He sold earlier than he probably would have wanted to.
Right.
But
Jake was wanting to.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that just a little bit more about your dad, if we can.
Okay.
So you talked about, and I don't know that we talked about this on air, but your dad, we were talking a little bit earlier with your brother Tony.
Yep.
And I would say one of the members of the next generation of Garden Spot, Joel Horst, who was
Right.
here with us.
Mm-hmm.
We're all standing here talking, and we were talking about your dad. And when he made that decision to become an apprentice at Hevner, I find this really fascinating. He was in the hospital, and he told me these stories when we were in a van driving to work, that he was studying electrical books in a hospital bed
Right.
when he was making that change.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the perseverance that he had just to realize I have to do something and then to throw himself at it. I mean, he never did anything half-hearted. So if he was going to do it, he was going to do it well, and he's going to jump in and do it right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you talk about how he got behind you and success. I think one of the biggest things to Garden Spot's culture. And I would say, Jake and Rufus together even did that because their values really aligned, which I think is really important in any company that you're a part of. You want to look at their values and make sure that they align with your values, because otherwise you're going to come to a point where your values don't align.
Right.
And that's going to create a problem. But I believe that their values aligned. And Rufus, when you talk about how he got behind you, and I think the key is he wanted you to succeed. Now, you were his son, and so people would think, well, that's because you were his son, except I was not.
Right.
And I started as an apprentice, and Rufus came from a different era of work. And I can remember, if we're going to do this thing, one of our taglines for the line is that it's honest conversation,
Right.
and we don't edit anything. I didn't tell you that before we started, by the
Okay.
way. But I didn't like working with Rufus when I first started working with him.
It's watch and learn. It's watch and learn.
Yes.
Yes.
And watch and learn. And I often felt like a nurse in an operating room where it was like, hand me the screwdriver,
Yep.
hand me the pliers. And but this was really good for me. I had to deal with being offended because I was in my early 20s. And there's this thing that I had in my early 20s, which I realized no one else has. It's just a me thing. I thought I knew everything. And so I would be offended because I'd be like, you know what, let me do the work. Let me. And in electrical, it's one of those things. I was just listening to a podcast that I had done with someone else who used to work here. And they made the comment of, well, you want to teach people and you want them to learn. But in our industry, there are certain things like you don't want someone troubleshooting a switchgear that's never been in a switchgear before, or you don't want someone troubleshooting a transformer, because if you troubleshoot it wrong,
Life-altering mistakes.
yes, life-altering mistakes. Yeah. So, but Rufus was what I learned with him was this: when I got outside of my pride, when I got away from my ego, let's call it that because that's what it was. When I got away from my ego, he noticed that, and that was when he started to treat me differently. And I think that's one of the important things for us as young people when we're into the trades. There are these guys out there, and they truly desire your success, like Rufus did. And that's what if you're looking for a job, and it really doesn't matter if you are 20, 30, 40, 50. The cool part about it is you can make that shift whenever you want, but you want to find people that want your success above their ego. And you just talked about Rufus and how he worked harder when you guys came on board. And I don't think he just did that for you. I think he did that because of his core values and what he believed.
Right.
And he applied that. And it's like, one, that's the guy that you want to be if you're in the industry, because let me tell you, life is hard. That is fulfilling and satisfying. When you're about working for other people's success, that changes what it is. And you're emulating that too. I know that when you bring these young people in, whether it's from your church, from youth groups, from high school, whatever it is, you're bringing them in because you want to give them an opportunity at their success.
Right.
And that was what Garden Spot was for me. And I didn't know it at the time. Well, let's break this up. It's got really deep and really heavy, so let's shake it off. And I'm going to ask you a softball question.
Okay.
So what is a tool or piece of gear that Clayton Good just cannot live without?
Are you talking about for business?
Oh, you can make it whatever you want. I mean, we are a trades podcast, but
Right.
if
So,
you...
I mean,
I did have a guy tell me toilet paper once.
I mean, in business, the tool is email for me.
Really?
I mean, that's how I manage most of the communication.
Really?
So, to a point where, now the texting's more and more of a thing. I tell my guys,
Hey, Clayton, texting's been more and more of a thing for like 20 years.
I know, but like for I don't want to get things to do with the business over text because I can't manage them the way I can. You would not believe my file structure, my emails. So I mean, I pull every week. I take an hour and pull all my emails to the jobs, to everything. So it's just the way that I stay organized, and I can keep on top until something's done. It's not moved out of my inbox. So that's probably the best tool that I have for managing projects, for bidding, that type of stuff.
So for that file structure, so I do something similarly where I actually in my email would create inboxes with job numbers on them.
Right.
And it would be the funny thing is, like I said, a lot of our job numbers are the letter of the beginning letter of our company and then the number. I wonder where I learned that from. But
I don't know if that's where that came from.
yeah, well, for me, that's where it came from.
Right.
Yeah, but the filing and having that in that way, the importance of that organization, and I don't know if that's because we started out as electricians. Like electrical work is complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and the only way to keep track of it all is to organize it. If you don't organize it, you're not making money on the job. If you don't organize it, you're going to end up getting to the end and not being able to be done when the deadline of that schedule is.
Do it one step at a time.
Yeah.
Yep.
One step at a time.
Yep.
So for business, it's email. Tell me a little bit about, because I just did a podcast with a contractor, and he talked about the importance of email and communication.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you not let email become evil?
By managing it, I think. I mean, like by taking the time. Like I said, I'd probably take at least an hour every week, just to go through and make sure that I'm up to date and everything, move things into the correct files. Otherwise, my inbox grows to a point. Now, and this is not something other guys in our office do. I mean, they have inboxes. Their inboxes.
You guys listening?
that have thousands of emails, and I was just like, for me, that's not, everybody.
Does that stress you out?
No, they do their work the way they do it.
No, I mean, if your email box had thousands of emails.
I wouldn't say stress, but I would, I don't get stressed out very much, but yeah.
We really need to unpack this. He doesn't get stressed out very much, and he's managing a multi-million-dollar electrical company.
Well, the joke has always been around here, if somebody came and said that Tony or I was upset at them, we just kind of laugh. No, it's not true, because they've probably never seen us upset at them.
Yeah, I can attest to that.
Yeah, so it's just like, yeah.
I never would want to see that, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about Garden Spot and what type of work do you guys do? Because that's another thing about not only the trades industry, but electrical industry. There are many different facets of industry. And, when we were talking, you commented on, well, you don't really need work right now. You guys are fine with work, which I think has to do with, one, the type of work that they do. And two, you guys are all about steady growth. And I'm going to use a word here, and it's not meant to be a negative. It's meant to be a positive, but slow and steady growth. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
And that's something that I was probably, between Tony, Dick, and I was probably the one that always would pull back when it rains.
Really?
And I'm still probably that person. And I'm not saying that any great credit. I mean, I don't have the entrepreneurial mind that Tony and Dick had to go out and go, this works great. We make a good profit. let's just do it. And
Right.
that's kind of where I've lived.
Yeah.
And so to me, having 100 electricians is not appealing to me.
Yeah.
We have 30 some guys in the field, and we've grown slowly through the years, and it's worked out great. I mean, that's the way we've been able to grow our workforce and have guys that we know we can count on. We know they're doing a good job. We know what they're doing, and we can trust them. I mean,
Well, and to that point, if I can interrupt you, just
Yeah.
one of the most expensive things that I learned in business was the amount of people on your payroll does not equal success.
Right, 100%.
I thought, oh, I have this many people, I've arrived, and it's all that meant was payroll was bigger every week.
Right.
That's all that meant.
Right.
And that doesn't mean, when you say not 100 electricians, it's like that doesn't. Garden Spot is not a small company. We're sitting in how big is this warehouse that we're in right now?
We have about 40,000 square feet here that we use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're in a 40,000 square foot facility that one is a lot like your email inbox. It's extremely well organized. There is, we're sitting in the heart of what I'll call wire country, but there are stacks and stacks of conduit over there. And there are many supply houses that I know would love to have this inventory.
Yeah.
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 For sure.
So, so you slow and steady growth.
Right.
That's what you guys have been about. Tell me more about that process.
Well, and that comes back to the shift to people versus being big.
Yeah.
And just in order to develop people, it's a slow process. And we're fortunate, like when we have this facility, when we get slow, we don't lay people off. We bring them back here and we do things.
I happen to know that that's true from personal experience.
We get creative. I mean, I'm trying.
Creative.
I'm trying. I honestly don't know if I laid off more than one person in 30 years.
Yeah. Wow.
So I mean,
I wasn't the one that he laid off. Just to be clear, that was not his way of firing me.
I was going to say I didn't say who I fired, but yeah.
You didn't say who you fired.
No.
I remember one of the first jobs that I was a young man. One thing I remember about Garden Spot was you guys didn't shy away from giving young people opportunity. And I can remember one of the very first jobs that I got to manage. It wasn't even like an announcement, hey, you're going to do this. It was, we were at a place where we needed work, and I actually didn't have the experience, but we had a lot of work, and they got guys with more experience that were subs and put them on the job. And I don't know if you remember this, but it really struck me. But I was the Garden Spot employee, and they put me there. And so it was my very first experience managing people and managing a job. And I remember you talked about your values, and I don't know if you fired him because he was a sub, but I remember there was a gentleman who his values didn't align, and it kept becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And you know how you have those things that happen in your life that like they're burned into your brain and you remember them. And like you talked about, Clayton never, if he did react, it was all inside. Like you never saw reaction. I don't know how to do that unless I'm exhausted, tired, or, well, we're not going to talk about drinking whiskey or anything like that on the podcast. But, you know, I am not naturally that way. I'm more reactive. But I remember a situation where there was someone that didn't align with our values. And I remember calling you on the phone and being like, hey, this is what's going on with this person. And I remember how you handled it. You came out on the job site. He was doing a duck bank. And it was really calm. It was just like, hey, we're done. And he was
I don't remember. I don't know.
I would say his name, but I don't want to say it on
No,
air.
no, that's fine.
But,
I understand.
I'll tell you.
What job was it?
Lhasa.
Oh, okay.
And but I mean, you don't remember, but I remember.
Right,
and those things are. But I remember the way that you handled it because I was watching from a distance, and it was just calm, cool, and collected. And this is the biggest thing that I learned from that. We needed him. There was a lot of work there, but he didn't align with the values of what Garden Spot wanted to represent to the client, to the other trades, and to their own people. And for me, I was the guy dealing with that day to day. And you didn't tell me that you were going to fire him. You didn't tell me that you were going to tell him to leave. But I called you with a problem, and you came out and you dealt with it. And I think that is probably one of the biggest things in construction and in the trades. It's a lot of high energy and high emotion. The importance of being calm, it kind of comes back to that slow and steady growth. Mm-hmm. You got to slow yourself down, even in a crisis situation. So a little shout out to Tony, what I remember from him.
He's that way too.
He is that way for sure. And I tell this story a lot. I tell a lot of stories to young men and women, because we employ both, in our organization overall. And not just our employees, but I'm talking with other businesses as well. So some of these Garden Spot things I'm sharing with other people. And these are the stories of what I've learned and the things that resonate in my mind. I tell this one quite a bit. I was on this job, and Tony was there, and we had a lot of guys were doing a big wire pull. And this was before Greenlee made a machine that would have these tires that you would squeeze on the wire. It would help you pull the wire. Well, before that, it was just a lot of people and a lot of grunting. Right. And so there was a lot of us guys there on this job, and it was a treatment plant, and we were working, and it was a big wire pull. And Tony would always be involved in big wire pulls.
Still is.
Yeah. And because you got to make sure that everything is right, because you don't want it to go wrong, because it'll cost you a lot of money. So anyway, to make a long story short, we needed a part, and the boss was there. I wanted him to know that I appreciated my job. I wanted him to view me as a good worker. This is a weird thing to say, but I always wanted my bosses to be proud of me. And I don't know if it's because of the way that you guys took on investing in people. It was like, in some ways, it was almost like a fatherly relationship. And Rufus was that way. Tony was that way. You were that way. And I remember I was like, oh, well, we need this part. We need this tool from the van. And I ran to the van and I ran back. If it was me, I would have yelled and been like, hey, don't run. And I would have yelled. Tony waited until I got back. Very calmly looked at me and he said, Joshua, we don't run on the job. And I was like, oh, well, I was doing that so that he would see that I wasn't being like, lazy. Right. And he made this comment, and he went into this conversation about, we don't run because what does that communicate to the rest of the job if you're running? What goes wrong when you hurry? It's like you can walk with intention, but right. You don't need to run because of what might happen because of that and what it communicates.
Right.
And so I think that those are some of the things that I learned. So when you talk about that slow and steady growth, and you talk about the culture and you talk about the people, what do you think for those who are listening that either are maybe starting a company like me that had no business in starting a company, or those companies that are there that are wanting to make that transition to the next level, and they want to be a heritage organization, they want to be a legacy organization. When you talk about that slow and steady growth, Clayton, tell us, what does that do for you? Like you say, it's not about 100 electricians, but when you do the slow and steady growth, and the reality is you are growing, and so there are many ways that what does that do as far as stability within an organization when you grow that way?
Oh, you hope it gets rid of some of the ups and downs, obviously. And just it helps with the process of not feeling rushed.
Yeah.
And I mean, slow and steady growth comes back to contentment. And being content where you are, not complacent, but being content where you are. I mean, and this goes back to my faith and what Dad taught me, as far as just, we're here for a purpose. I mean, and it's far beyond pulling any of this wire in anywhere else, anything like that. And so that's where the slow growth and the investment in people come from. It's what the people. I'll value. I'll put what I'm trying to think how to say this. I won't do a job that I think we can make a lot of money at if I feel it's going to be a detriment to our employees.
Okay. So for those of us who are listening, give an example. Like, you don't need to use specifics.
Right.
But like, what does that mean? What does it look like?
Well, we're a very family-oriented business, a lot of families. I won't bid a job where our guys have to travel and stay overnight. It's just not something I won't do. Maybe once or twice for 1-2 days, that type of thing.
Right.
But just as a practice, and just how we structure where we will bid our jobs is very important for us that our guys get home. The whole being able to work 4-10s has been a huge thing for families. And it's also a good business decision because we're traveling to the job 20% less. There's just a lot of things like that work hand in hand. It's good business, but it's also good personally and spiritually for the guys, just to be able to be and not feel rushed, not to feel like, I mean, there's jobs obviously that are always pushed, but to realize that we understand today's today, you get done with today, and tomorrow's tomorrow, and that's when you work on tomorrow. Yeah.
Say that phrase there again. That's a today's today.
Today's today, and that's what you work on, and tomorrow's tomorrow, and you work on tomorrow. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I mean, you have to plan for tomorrow, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a biblical verse that actually talks about not worrying about tomorrow because it has enough worries of its own.
Right.
And, the importance if you're going to persevere like Rufus did, if you're going to persevere in life, that's about not giving up, which means you don't need to be focusing on what's not right in front of you.
Right.
I mean, you really need to do the work that's in front of you, and that's important. So we talked a little bit, Garden Spot does a lot of wastewater work. Like, you guys are well known for that, wastewater treatment type work. And I don't remember if we were on air when you said this or not, but I think this is important because in building a strong organization, this is one of those things that we always talk about these things, but very few companies actually live them out. And what I mean by that is the importance of, earlier you were telling me about, so the work has changed a little bit. Like, it used to be prime. And if you don't know what prime is, it's when you used to, well, actually, I'm not the expert here. Why don't you explain to people what prime work is versus non-prime?
Yeah, prime in Pennsylvania, they have a Separations of Contract Act. Any job that's over $25,000, every trade has to have their own bid prime. Other states is very different. Maryland's is all subcontracts anyway. So that means that I bid directly to the owner, and if I'm low, I get the job. If I'm $10 high, the guy who's $10 below me gets the job. So
what if it's a $5 million bid and the other guy's $5 million, $10 less than you? Does he win the bid even if it's $4 million?
If he's less than me, yes.
$80 and you're $5 million?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, unless something's wrong with their bid or something.
So I'm going to ask a fun question for me and any estimator that might be listening. What is the closest bid you've ever had? One that you've lost and one that you've won?
Boy, from memory, I mean,
you're not that old, Clayton.
I know that we've won them by under $100 and lost them by like several $100,000 to $1 million jobs and over $100. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is the feeling when you're? Do you now? It's changed when I was still here, you would go and they would open the envelopes and read the bids.
Yeah.
What is the feeling that you experience when you lose that by $100?
It's I mean, everybody gets together in the office and commiserates. And I mean, it's because you could get there.
Yeah.
I mean, any job you lose that you could have, I could have took $20,000 off that $10 million job to get me there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's.
So I think in building an organization that's been here since 1967, it's in the second generation, moving to the third generation, which kudos to you. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. But in that, let's talk about this, because in construction, there is this thing that we do, and I call it the race to the bottom. And talk about why you won't do that. Because this is important. If you're listening and you have started a business, or you're a project manager, or you're an estimator, his answer to this question, I believe, is really, really important if you're going to build a stable organization.
Yeah, we will never bid a job not to make money.
Right.
I mean, and that. So it's not. You built this up for some big thing. I don't know.
Well,
if
I built
have
it
a
up
big
because of this. The temptation is to be like, I give a bid. Yeah, I'll cut my number.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what I mean. And
Yeah,
that's what I'm
okay,
talking about. Not
okay.
from a public perspective.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm
yeah.
asking you to speak to young estimators, project managers, and people who are starting out.
Right.
Because actually, it hurts the entire industry.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah. When times get tough and people get slower, that's obviously when that happens. More and more people will tend to cut their number, and it ultimately ends up hurting your company. You know, and what's the point? If you can't, you know, if you don't have a healthy company, then your employees aren't going to be there. You aren't going to help them. You can't serve anybody. You know, it becomes circling the drain.
Well, and I would say you guys have a reputation for when the number goes out on the street, that's the number.
Yes.
There's not this. If I can speak to this, because I have a little bit of an outside perspective, people don't call Garden Spot and say, "Hey, here's my buy number." No. Their buy number is what you sent out on bid day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we try to establish that with suppliers coming to us, which has become tougher and tougher.
Yeah.
But I mean, it used to be, we tell people if what their number they give us on bid day, that's what we'll rate your purchase order for.
Yeah.
And we stick to that as much as we can. There are extenuating circumstances in today's market, today's world, where numbers don't tend to be as solid as they once were.
I wish I didn't know what you're talking about. So you talked a little bit about, and then again with this slow and steady growth and the importance of building something that is stable. Talk about what that has done, what Rufus and Jake built for you to build on top of, what you're building. One of the things that you said is, you know, the prime work is changing, and it's changing to the point where, and this is what I want to get at. When you're in the stage that Clayton and Tony are in, and where they're going, when you build something with reputation and you hold to these values, it creates not a monopoly, but I will say it creates something that you couldn't have built had they not laid the foundation for you. And it is a game changer as far as profitability and success for the future. When you bid a non-prime job in your field, what happens?
Well, people they know we're qualified. They know how we do our work. They know we're straight shooters. They want to work with us.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say most jobs, even the public works, the prime jobs that we go and we bid, the engineer, the owner want us to get the job. I mean, they don't have the final say because the numbers have the final say. But then when we're working sub work and the GC has the final say, if it's treatment plant work, they want to work with us. We try to be good people to work with, both in the work we do, but also in the business end, where we try to be cooperative and we aren't the squeaky wheel. We just get in there, do our work, go for it, and get out.
I love this. It all started with a farmer and a Ukrainian immigrant that they started this company. They implemented their values. And what I would say one of the biggest things in your reputation is, you know, Garden Spot is the type of company that they've always been here and they always will be. And is what I mean by that is one of the biggest things that you've taught me and others, I think, is the importance of you do what you say and you say what you do. That LASA project that I was telling you about, one of the other things that stuck in my memory was one of the things that I loved to do was duck bank work when I worked here, because I was not the troubleshooter guy. I was not the PLC guy. I was the glue conduit together and put dirt over top of it guy. But I remember climbing down into a manhole that had been there for, 20 years. And you remember they used to write on manholes when they would ship them out on the concrete, on the precast. And I climbed down in this manhole that had been installed years prior. at a treatment plant. And what did I see on the side of the manhole? GSE, meaning that was installed by one of my predecessors before I was there. And that's what you're talking about. When you build slow and steady, you know, it's kind of like the old story that you hear when you're a kid. And we all kind of, I don't know why we write these stories off, but like the tortoise and the hare. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm calling you a tortoise, you know,
Sorry.
but the tortoise and the hare, that's how you win the race. Mm-hmm. And you talk about that from a contentment standpoint. I think that contentment is something that we really misunderstand, and we look at it with disdain, and we should look at it with desire. Like, we should desire to be content, because I think it actually brings peace to our overall life.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even in like the business profitability, I'm content with where we're at. I don't need to strive to squeeze every penny out of every project. I mean, and just an example of how we work as a company. I mean, we pay all of our guys and their families health insurance, 100%.
100%.
100%. Because we
So
feel,
if you're looking for a job, Garden Spot is located.
so because it goes back to the values that we have, that we want these guys to have a stable income, a career, something they can count on. And yeah, we could make a little bit more money if we would say, all right, you need to contribute to your health insurance plan. But $400,000, $500,000 a year goes towards
Yeah.
us investing in our employees.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's proven worth it.
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely. Well, you don't have a high turnover rate.
No.
That I know.
Right.
And I would say I know some other people that don't work here anymore, but one of the things, and I think I started to say this in the beginning, was when I went to work somewhere else, I was like, oh my goodness, if this company can do this, then I could do this. Like that was the, because I learned the way that you guys did things, and it's actually not that common, because it takes discipline, it takes diligence, and it takes a desire for contentment to be there. And I think that's something that you have to work towards. Mm-hmm. So with that, I'm gonna get to one more serious question, and then we're gonna let you go. But before I get to that serious question, so we're here in Lancaster County, which is where you have a very strong reputation. Mm-hmm. I'm asked a question almost always when I am doing a job or I'm involved in a meeting or something, and people hear, where I used to work. And I want to be really clear, and I hope this is okay. I would love to get this recorded. I love telling people where I come from.
Okay.
I hope that's okay that I do that.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So we've recorded it. I'm allowed to tell people that my origins come from Garden Spot Electric. So, and thank you for what you guys have taught me in the beginnings here. But now that I've buttered you up,
Okay.
why are your trucks green? Like, it is a question that I'm asked, and we're not just talking about any green. We're talking about a special shade of green. But
We call
ask the question.
We call it Garden Spot green now.
Yeah.
But it happened by accident. I mean, when Dad and Jake were in business, I mean, you didn't think about, there was nothing to that wasn't the time you promoted businesses. You just did your work, whatever. Nobody cared.
Yeah.
And then as through the 80s, that color was a Ford factory color, and we decided, okay, well, we don't spend much money on advertising, but that color stands out, so everybody that sees that color is going to know that's us.
Right.
And that's basically how it's morphed into, that became our company color, and our advertising budget is spent basically in, we used to be painting, now wrapping our trucks that color green, because that's really all we do for advertising.
Wow.
Yeah, and people know.
People do know.
If they see that truck, it's either a Garden Spot Electric or Garden Spot Mechanical truck.
Yeah. Well, and I know that the interesting thing about that is, I remember, like, you guys really understood the importance of, and it's a different type of marketing. When when we first started talking, Blackline, we're in business to provide marketing for the trades, which will never be hired by Garden Spot. But here's why. Not because we're not amazing. But the reason why is their marketing is different. And it's the type of work that they're going after and the type of way that they want to grow. And what I'm talking about is your understanding of marketing, even from the beginning. I remember when I started, there was a barn that had multiple trucks in it that were green. Tell us what that was and what the purpose was. And
well, as that color diminished in popularity,
we think it might come back, but we don't know.
The only way you could get a factory from the factory was by 5.
Yeah.
So we bought 5 of them. And then, but we didn't need 5.
So you didn't buy one truck. You would buy, when you needed one truck, you would buy 5.
And that only happened once. But
Okay.
yeah. Because, we probably had, 5, 6 trucks on the road back then
Yeah.
at that. So, it's not like we needed 5 trucks at once. So we bought 5, stored them at Eddie's place. And then, and then when we needed one, we'd go get it and put it in the field.
So they literally bought 5 trucks, and then when they needed another truck, they had their own stock of trucks. I think that encapsulates a little bit of what Garden Spot is. We're sitting here and we talked about how many supply houses would love this warehouse. Maybe not, because they want stuff to come in and out.
They want to move it, and we move it more than. But yeah,
for sure. So, but I mean, that's an understanding of the importance of that marketing, and it really works because everybody's truck is white. Everybody's, it's like, and you see more and more companies deciding to do that. I remember when I was an apprentice, you sent me with a van to paint the van. And I think that you guys were one of the foremost to do this, because now everybody does this. They would pay to have the van painted, and they didn't even open up the doors. They didn't even paint the door jambs. Right. You guys would just paint it green. And now I see companies doing that all the time. That's what we do.
Yeah. It's wrapped. Everybody's going wrapped.
Everybody's wrapping it too. Yeah. So Clayton, I often sit down and I have these conversations with people, and I think it's really important to make this statement, and I hope it's okay that I do this. Rufus is a big part of when I have these conversations and I talk with people. For me, I share with people how, for me, when I ask this next question, what's a mistake that you've made? Rufus taught me this. I would be driving with him, to a job in a van, and while Clayton might not bid jobs that are far away that you have to sleep overnight, he has no problem bidding jobs where you have to drive for at least an hour or more. And so we would get in the van and we would drive to the job together. And so I would get this time with Rufus where we would have a real and honest conversation. And a lot of joking around, but he would get to a point in the conversation, and I guess this is what we would call the original podcast, because that's all it was. It was just a conversation, and when we would get to a certain point, it would get to a point we've been talking for a while, and he would share with me different mistakes that he had made, which I think is really important as an individual, as a person, to be able to acknowledge mistakes that you've made, that you can learn from them. Because if you can't acknowledge them, then you can't learn from them. And what he would do is he would share those things with me so that I would be able to learn from them and maybe not repeat the same mistake. And some of them would be big. Some of them would be simple. Some of them be like, hey, when you make up a wire head, make sure that you do this, this, and this so it doesn't pull off. But some of them would be like, hey, this is why you shouldn't quit. Or this is why you shouldn't do this. This is why probably one of the biggest things that he talked with me about was the importance of knowing my values and living them out truthfully at work. And so I want to honor him in that because he taught me that.
Yeah, me too.
And I know he's no longer with us, but his legacy is with us. Mm-hmm. And that's something that affects me, other people here in this organization, and other people who've been here. Mm-hmm. So for you, I want to ask Clayton, what is a mistake that you've made that you'd be willing to share with our listeners that they might be able to learn from it?
One we kind of already talked about would have been in hiring and trying to hire people that we don't know, and we don't know their values, and we're just hiring because we need somebody really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that that had come back to bite us several times in different situations, where the number one thing I think of that is we had bid a job that we didn't have the supervision
Mm-hmm.
to handle it,
Yeah.
and we went out to hire somebody to supervise it, and 2 different times that we've done that in the last 30, 40 years, it really ended badly
Yeah.
as far as just how the job went, because they weren't projecting our values
Yeah.
to the owner, to the GC, to you know so we weren't being represented well, and then also the jobs just there was a few ethical issues sometimes that
Yeah.
were wrong and bad, and then and the worst thing in the world is having to go to an owner and apologize to them for something your employee did.
Yeah.
You know, and so those situations happened once or twice, and in that process we've learned that not to bid work that you can't do.
Right.
Again, that goes back to the slow growth. It's not worth it. You know, even if it's a great opportunity, it's not worth it. Yeah.
Is that because it puts you in a position where you have to sacrifice values?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
I think you touch on something that's really important that I think is probably one of the most important things for an individual and a company, and one of the hardest things. You talked about as the organizations that I'm in have grown and I've got farther away from doing the actual work. It really is something to have to apologize for something that your organization did, but that you didn't do.
Right.
But it is essential.
Oh yeah.
It is essential, and to go to a client or an owner, and we get this fear mindset related to that, where it's like, well, I don't want to, because you feel like they might have something over on you, or they might have this, or they might view it differently. And Garden Spot's reputation is pretty big, in a good way, which then gives you credibility when you do that. They recognize, well, that's not who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, I had a situation, and someone came to me and they said, well, I know who you are because of your history. And that spoke volumes over accusations, over lies, over mistakes, all of that stuff. And I think one of the things that you're touching on with that mistake is the importance of, whether you're an apprentice, a journeyman, a project manager, or an owner, when you make a mistake, or someone that you're managing makes a mistake, it's your responsibility to have the conversation about it. It's your responsibility to talk about it and address it. And no matter how scary that is, not doing it is far worse than whatever the fear is that you do it. And I would say, having been on both sides of it, when I have a young man or a young woman come to me and be like, this happened, and they have to have a hard conversation with me, my respect level for them goes through the roof.
Right.
Not only that, but also one of the things that I think is a commodity, we're sitting around all this copper wire, trust goes up for them. And listen, while there is millions of dollars of copper wire here, this is going to sound like a load of crap when I say this, I would rather have the trust commodity than the copper wire commodity, hands down.
Mm-hmm.
Because that plays into, when you bid a job and you're not low, people trust you.
Mm-hmm.
They trust Garden Spot. And there's that phrase out there, there's the lowest bid, and then there's the lowest qualified bid.
Right. Right.
And that's what you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Just, I mean, it all ties together. The statement will have a big G, little g.
Yeah.
And the big G's God and the little G's Garden Spot. And as long as you keep those two things, those two G's in perspective, a lot of things fall into place.
I love how you put Garden Spot right in line with God. I see that.
I said big G,
big G,
little G.
I'm just messing with you. Well, I think that's another important thing to honor in the men who founded this organization.
Mm-hmm.
Their faith played a huge part of what they do and why they do it. Faith plays a huge part in what I do and why I do it. I think it plays a huge part for you. And I think regardless of what you believe, going after what's honorable, what's good, that is the only way that you're going to have satisfaction in life, is if you're going after those things. And quite frankly, I don't even understand what the motivation to go after them is if you don't acknowledge Big G,
Right.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, Clayton, truly this has been an honor for me to sit here and talk with you. I know that you're a busy guy. I think that time is money. And so you have invested your time with us here today. And I just want to say thank you for the investment that you've put in me as an individual. And I want to say thank you for all the other men and women that this company has put an investment in, into building into their future, which I think builds into our entire culture and society, because the trades play a huge part in what we do and why we do it. And so look for a company like Garden Spot if you're starting out and you want to build slow and steady, but you want to build for a lifetime beyond your own. I think that's what it's about. So
I agree 100%.
yeah. And thank you, Rufus.
Yeah. For sure.